Welcome back to another episode of trying to figure out Hakari's abilities. So coming off of the previous chapter, we saw Hakari immediately activate his domain expansion again once his jackpot infinite cursed energy ran out. And that brings us to the beginning of the chapter here, where Kashimo is getting the exposition dump on how Hakari's domain expansion works, just like how Charles did previously. And it's saying that it's happening faster than he could give up on activating Hollow Wicker Basket. That's an odd way of phrasing that. Hollow Wicker Basket is like the old version of Simple Domain. We saw Reggie use it against Megumi, but the fact that Kashimo would even use Hollow Wicker Basket in order to defend himself against Hakari's domain here makes me wonder if he even has his own domain expansion. The spoilers actually said that he did, but in this chapter, there's no confirmation for it. And considering what he does here before the flashback, maybe that's him activating it, but he doesn't say it, so maybe he doesn't. Or maybe he doesn't even want to use it. Remains to be seen. Okay, so let's get into breaking down this sequence. So immediately Hakari is essentially activating his patchy slot and doing like the slot machine roll thing here.
And considering that the last time he hit his jackpot against Charles, he lined up 3 odd numbers because we saw that he hit 3 threes, he's immediately starting off with a chance booster here.
And the one that he's getting, I'm pretty sure, is the Yumi background, where it says when advancing to a scenario, a tantalizing image of Yumi Asagiri appears. And I guess that's signified by the girls in the bathing suits here. And with that, he gets increased probability for the jackpot, or just getting better spins in general. But by doing that, he is now not in an unkillable state because he's in the increased probability mode, as it's indicated here in this chart. Kashimo is also aware of this. Like I said previously, Kashimo is going to be way more confident than Charles was coming into this, despite him being from like 400 years ago. But after this, they go into like a fighting sequence, and it winds up with Kashimo getting the better of Hakari here, but then suddenly Hakari breaks out of it and he says continuation, and then at the top right corner we see the ×2 marker. This is a visual effect indicator, and it's one of the consecutive effects. It's actually the second best one. Hey guys, also if you like my Jujutsu Kaisen content, please subscribe if you haven't already. It's fine if you don't want to, but if you needed a reminder, here you go. Thanks. So as we see here in this video of this guy playing the Tekken Patchy Slot Machine, this is from the channel How to Play Pachinko and Patchy Slot. What I think is going on here, or at least what I think Gege is trying to represent, is that hand-to-hand sequence of Kashimo and Hakari is kind of playing out the way that this little action scene here plays out on the screen. And as the slots roll at the bottom, Hakari is essentially getting a ×2 on one of these columns, which is good because it generates a visual effect, and it also gives him more chance, as well as a consecutive effect, meaning he can do it again. And the benefit of generating these visual effects is because if he gets one or more, he can advance to a Riichi scenario. And Riichi basically means you go into this cutscene sequence that can lead to a potential jackpot. So he redoes the fight with Kashimo once again and still loses to him. But because it was consecutive, he could do the renewal here, and once he rolls again, he now gets a ×3, which is the best consecutive effect. So now that he's got a ×2 and a ×3, like I said before, he's generated 2 or more visual effects, and he can advance to a Riichi scenario, which is just going to a cutscene that may or may not lead to the jackpot, like we see here in this Tekken video. Coincidentally enough, in this Tekken video, the player also gets 2 6s, just like Hakari does here in the chapter. So now that he's advanced to this Riichi scenario, the cutscene begins. And this time, the cutscene that he's getting is the Potty Emergency Riichi, which is 2 out of 3 stars. So it's the second best, I guess, the best being Friday Night Final Train, which we saw him use against Charles. And as Hakari says, if the character reaches Shin Yuri Gawaka without an accident, the result is a jackpot Riichi scenario. So it's just like in this Tekken cutscene scenario here. If Jin is able to overcome Kazuya, then it's a success and he'll go to the jackpot, meaning the result gives him 3 6s. And in this video, the player gets 3 6s, just like Hakari winds up getting, because his cutscene scenario here winds up being successful, and the character here, Hiro Kato, winds up making it to the bathroom. So that's pretty much the equivalent of Jin beating Kazuya in this cutscene. And that causes Hakari to say, start the music, because as it was revealed in the previous chapter, the private Pure Love Train theme song plays when Hakari gets the jackpot. Now that he has it, he has unlimited cursed energy for 4 minutes and 11 seconds, which essentially means that he is unkillable and has perpetual reverse curse technique. But apparently there's a little catch here, because Kashimo says since the jackpot was an even number, it was triple sixes, even if he opens the domain again after the 4 minutes and 11 seconds is over, like he did at the end of the previous chapter, then his increased probability will have ended, which means of course that he won't get the jackpot as quickly again. And that brings us to the beginning of this chapter, where he's coming in with increased probability because he hit the jackpot against Charles with an odd number, which he had triple threes against him, so that gave him increased probability coming into the next domain expansion. But Kashimo figures, like any rational person would, that if he can survive for the next 4 minutes and 11 seconds, then he can defeat Hakari, because, you know, he won't be invincible at that point. Kashimo, he don't play like that. The crux of Kashimo's character is fighting a worthy opponent, getting that rush, getting pushed to his absolute limit. So he'd rather just fight Hakari at his most powerful with unlimited cursed energy and still be able to beat him at that point, because that brings us to where he's like, turn up the volume because this is a funeral for the living. But we're cutting away from that and we're going to a flashback. This is happening 400 years ago, I'm assuming, where we see Kinjaku, in a previous host that he was in at this point, coming up to Kashimo, and Kashimo already knows that it's Kinjaku, apparently, and Kinjaku's like, did you have fun? And we see that he had killed some dude, and Kashimo says, not at all, I should have fought you. Kinjaku's like, no, spare me, I'm not fit for fighting right now. So I assume that means that the host that he's in at this point isn't like powerful or anything. He was more so just in this to orchestrate more of his plan, which makes sense because he wasn't always like an ultra powerful ghetto body. I mean, at one point he was in the woman who was Yuji's mom, so I'm sure he wasn't too powerful at that point either. But why does Kashimo know Kinjaku at this point? Well, I'm assuming that Kinjaku has been in contact with Kashimo, kind of like a drug dealer, like feeding him what he wants, like giving him these strong opponents, like, hey, fight this guy, here, fight this guy, and he keeps coming back to him, you know, keep chasing that high, which is like Kinjaku's big plan here, because he ultimately wants to make this deal with Kashimo. But then Kinjaku says, but I heard about something intriguing in Michinoku. The greatest cursed energy output ever happened in Date province, a veritable cannon. So here's where we're seeing Ryu back in his original time, which was also 400 years ago. And we knew this because when Ryu was having like his final clash with Akotsu, it said something along the lines of a thirst that hadn't been quenched in over 400 years, which, you know, pretty much told us that Ryu was from 400 years ago. And we also knew that Kashimo was from 400 years ago too, because he said, oh man, the sorcerers were much stronger 400 years ago. And it made me wonder, like, well, if both of these guys kind of want the same thing, a worthy opponent, which they seemingly hadn't received, why didn't they just fight each other if they both came from the same time? And I also thought one of the explanations is, you know, the world's a big place, maybe they were just too far away from each other, and apparently that's the case because Kashimo's like, Michinoku, that's far away. So that's Gege's explanation as to why these two ultra powerhouses who existed at the same time, who both wanted the same thing, didn't fight each other. But then Kashimo asks Kinjaku, like, who's the strongest sorcerer you know? And Kinjaku says, Sukuna. I'm sorry that it's from 600 years ago, but I'm not changing my mind. And this is like the hook that Kinjaku finally got into Kashimo to make him hear out what his big plan is here for, you know, what eventually happens with Kashimo becoming a cursed object and eventually, you know, being put into the culling game 400 years later. Because he's like, well, in that case, I'll entertain what you say. Then I could fight Sukuna. Also, this pretty much confirms our theory on what's going on with Kashimo that we've been talking about for these last couple weeks as to like what his main motivation in the culling game is. And yeah, it's pretty much because he was promised by Kinjaku that he would eventually get a chance to fight Sukuna. And I think this also kind of confirms that Sukuna being like an opponent in the culling game was always kind of his plan. I actually recently made a video about this, you can check it out right here, or I'll just have it as a card at the end of the video. But yeah, Reggie talks about a bomb going off in the culling game eventually, and this also lines up with Kinjaku saying that Yuji and Sukuna are a bomb. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that like once only the strongest players of the culling game are left, Sukuna will be unleashed, probably when he chants in chain, and then whatever that sequence leads to him becoming his own autonomous being. It's gonna be everyone versus Sukuna, forced to evolve, and it's like Heian era all over again, or the new Heian era. And then Kashimo turns around and we see that he's old, which is interesting, right? Because the Kashimo that we know currently is not old. And it makes me wonder, like, so why is he young now? Is it because when the cursed object version of the person gets reincarnated, they go back to their prime? Or is it solely dependent on the vessel? Like, if it's a young vessel, then do they become young as well? It's not really made too clear because we don't really know all of the variables yet. I mean, Ryu seems to be the same age that he was, more or less, but Dhruv is still kind of old when we saw him. But he's like a special case, I guess, because he says he's a veteran in his second incarnation. And it's never really made clear exactly what that means. Or maybe it just comes down to how they want to appear or whatever specific deal they make with Kinjaku.
Kashimo's also coughing up blood in this sequence, so this might play into a possible ailment that he had that may have been healed by Kinjaku, or him reverting to his prime maybe mitigates him having this illness. It's possible that this might come up again against Hakari later on, maybe.
Maybe it'll be revealed in the next chapter. But let me know what you think about this one in the comments, guys. I'm so excited to see the next chapter because we're going to get Kashimo versus Hakari, you know, all out. But if you liked the video, guys, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day and I'll see you in the next one.